Welcome back to Real-ationship Goals, a podcast all about exploring the realities and complexities of healthy relationships. Real-ationship Goals is a project of the Prevention and Education team at the Advocacy Center for Crime Victims and Children in Waco, Texas. If you or someone you know has experienced sexual violence or harassment and is seeking support services or needs more information, links to resources and our hotline number can be found in the description. The views expressed in this podcast are those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect those of their organizations or affiliates. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Real-ationship Goals. We're so excited to be here with you. I'm Kyla, I use she, her pronouns.
I'm Ariana, I use she, her pronouns. I'm Monica, I use they, she pronouns.
And I'm Elsie, and I use she, her pronouns.
Today we are back with another media analysis, and today we are going to be discussing the fantastic movie Elemental. So I will go ahead and just kick us off with first question. So something that was extremely prevalent throughout the entire movie was like the meaning of tradition and how tradition looks different for the different elements in the movie. So I guess like what did that mean for you, like in watching the movie? Like what stood out of the traditions of everyone, and also like what does tradition look like for you, or some ways it appears in your lives?
I think the tradition in the movie was like they were making like things out of fire, basically.
The coal?
The coal or something. The coal nuts or something.
Yeah.
I just feel like it's real sincere of how her father, as a young child, just had so much care and effort to show her the tradition and how she honestly grew up loving it. Instead of it just being like a you have to learn this, you have to do this type of thing, but just them bonding in that situation. I feel like the sincerity was very important, and I like that. Traditions, just the traditions in our home.
Like what it means to you too.
Just something you can share with one another. Like just it could be really simple, just something you can share with one another, and it get passed down to generations. Something that is supposed to be enjoyable.
I just lit up because I finally realized a tradition. So I'll answer that one first. Within my family, I was so stuck because I was thinking of like mom, dad, sister, but I'm like, we don't really have traditions. But me and my favorite cousin, I don't even know how many years we're apart, like 3-4 years apart, and I'm older, but we would always go trick-or-treating together. And as we got older, we would listen to the Laffy Taffy song. So we say that that's our Halloween song, even though it's not about candy. You know what I'm saying? So that's a tradition. And I remember we hadn't done it for a while because, at some point kids feel like they're too cool for school, stop trick-or-treating. But the last time we went trick-or-treating together, I think I was with a huge break in between. But I think the last time we did it, I was a junior in high school, and it was so sweet because we were like, oh my gosh, I feel like we're kids again. It was so sweet. But the first question was,
just like the meaning of tradition in the movie and like what traditions from it stood out to you.
Oh yes, something that I was thinking about. I don't know if you want to call it religion or faith, but like how much comfort the blue flame brought to them. I think that was really, really special. And then in times of distress, they would go and pray to the blue flame. And even when destruction came, sorry for the spoiler, but like a tsunami flood type of thing, that was the thing that they were more worried about, was that because it was preserving, I guess, their tradition, because that was the one part that they could not remake. They took that small part from their homeland and things like that. So I thought that was really sweet, and it just shows that it got passed down to Ember. That was one part.
Okay, I'm going to preface this also by saying that mine's going to be a spoiler as well. So if you don't want to hear it, fast forward approximately 1 minute.
It's safe to say if you don't want spoilers, don't listen to this episode.
But also I thought you were going to take it, so I appreciate you not doing that. But the bow. So when the dad, what's his name, Bernie?
Yes.
Okay, so Bernie, when he was like traveling from Fire City, the Firelands, into
Elemental City.
Elemental City. Thank you.
It's my hometown.
But anyway, so there's this vow that they have in the fire culture that is like so incredibly important, and Bernie did that to his dad, but his dad didn't return the vow, and that was something that like was really hard for Bernie to live with. And so then at the end, when at the end when Ember and Wade were leaving, she like did the vow, and so I just thought that it was cool, like how obviously that story stuck with everybody, but like how much the story stuck with her, and just kind of like a tradition of great respect in their culture. And then he returned it.
Wait, there's something I think. Like the water people be crying.
Yeah.
They cry a lot, and like it's like they even have a game of like trying not to cry, right? Yeah. So like that's a whole big part I think of their culture. And I remember when they were leaving, Wade and his family were crying, and the dad was like, "Amber, are you sure about this one?" I think that's also so funny. But it's one of their traditions of literally just crying. Yeah. Sorry, I just thought that was so funny. Or like when he was trying to leave to who knows where after their heartbreak, they were all crying and they were like, "I painted you this picture." Okay, sorry.
But and then for tradition to me, I guess, yeah, I guess like my one big tradition is that my mom and I always watch Elf on Thanksgiving. And like even when I went to college and I started spending Thanksgiving here, like I would still watch it and like FaceTime her so that we were like still watching it together technically. But it's something that we do like every year, and it's always like really just my mom and I that pay attention, and everyone else is just kind of there. So it's kind of fun to like have one thing with my mom that nobody else really cares about. They just kind of sit there and talk, but we get to hang out and watch a movie.
Special.
Yeah.
I get it. I think for me it's always complicated because I feel like there's this want to have tradition be like this almost like I'm going to use this phrasing and it's not fully what I mean, but it's the best that I can think of right now. Like this I will say like overly sacred thing of where it's like we have like a stigma in our minds of like it has to look this way, otherwise like it or it's not tradition, but tradition is in like the really small things. Like before we were filming, talking about
Going to Burger King.
Yeah, oh, things like yeah. Small things. And like in my head, I was like, there have been so many also just like weekly traditions. Because it's like tradition doesn't have to be something that you do every year or every however many years or things like that.
Or
like,
even with parents and things like that. Because that's where I was really stuck. I was like, oh no, girls in the room type of thing. But I was always saying, yeah, my cousins, type of thing.
So like it can be small things and like even moments that you just have like with yourself too. So like a small, very silly tradition that I adhere to every time is every year when the clock turns from October 31st to the very first second of November 1st every year, I like to listen to Mariah Carey's All I Want for Christmas Is You exactly one time. And then I do not listen to it again until December. And I've done that every year since like freshman year of college.
That's so interesting now that you put it that way, because I didn't even think about traditions I have with myself. Every time after therapy, I go get myself a matcha. Yeah. I'm like, that is a tradition. I didn't even think about that. Because it's like a sandwich. That's how they call it. Like before, during, and after. My after is always like, I'm going to get a small treat.
Yeah. Just to care for yourself. Like traditions can also just be ways that we connect to anything, connect to other people, we connect to ourselves, things like that. Yeah, I was trying to. There were so many just throughout the movie, but a small thing that stood out to me was they go to an airball game, And
The crop dusters.
yeah, and Ember is feeling one particular way about the game and about all the people there and about the person that they went to the game to try and talk to, and definitely had like one set way of like looking at them and a set of opinions about them. And after the game, the person that they were trying to connect with shares this story about why she cares so much about like this sports game that to other people is dumb and inconsequential, but it's she would go to games with her dad, and I believe implied that he had like passed away, but or was like no longer with her for some reason. But like even thing sometimes traditions can seem silly or small to other people, but it's really the meaning that we hold for them, like ourselves. I think that's so.
Everybody's looking at me all at once.
Your turn.
Okay. My question is, how does the film explore the concept of validation?
Ooh. Oh wow. Yeah, she cooked that one up while you were out of the room.
Yeah, man, I don't even have time to think about that. Okay, y'all go first.
Yeah, I was gonna say I can, or
No, you go ahead.
okay. But the part that I liked a lot about it was that Wade, because like at first they had a friendship and then it turned into like a little bit more and then it kept turning into more. But like throughout that whole time, I thought that it was really cool how Wade, like really encouraged Ember because at first I think someone else is going to talk about this, and I'm just going to like touch on it briefly. But like Ember wanted a lot of validation from her dad, and so I think that with Wade's encouragement, she really learned how to get validation from herself and kind of just like explore what she really wanted. And so I thought that that was really cool.
Don't look at me.
Yeah.
Laura picked a good one.
Yeah,
Really.
no, pick a stumper.
But I think the concept of validation, like when she first went into the city, is Elemental City?
Mhm.
Okay, yeah. When I first went into Elemental City and meeting all the different um elements at the airball game, of how like you were saying before in the first question, like she had already formed opinions about those different elements. Um, but also deep down inside, it felt like she wanted to be accepted by all these different elements at the same time. And then just like throughout the whole entire movie with her father, like she held that very so close to her heart with wanting to have that validation from her father of like, am I doing a good job? I can do this. You can, I'm showing you that I can do this. Um, but it also just is like a trail of like seeking validation from her father, seeking out validation from other elements in the elemental city, and then also finding her way to seeking self-validation. And she learned that from a good old friend.
More than a friend.
No, I'm just
Well, yeah, ended up being more than friends.
Okay, so this it's going to tie into my question later, but something that really resonated with me, I'll start with that, was her anger. And I, again, more spoilers, but eventually her dad was like, when you can handle your anger, you're ready for the shot, to take over the shot. But realistically, at that time, she couldn't handle her anger, but she wanted that validation. So what she did is she physically ran away to hide her anger and truly physically explode somewhere else where people can't see her for the sake of validation. And that's very, very common where we try to hide things or try to not sugarcoat, because I don't think she was sugarcoating it. I think it was really just hiding maybe shame, embarrassment, whatever it may be, of certain emotions for validation of like, oh, I do have things under control, or things of that sort. So I think that was one way they explored validation. To
I think y'all made wonderful points. And I don't think I have, at this point in time, I don't think I have anything valuable to contribute. So I think that's a wonderful segue into your question. Like I mentioned, I think that's perfect.
So my question was going to be kind of focusing on Ember's anger. That was a big focus in the beginning of the movie. And I mean, somewhat throughout the movie, just in different ways. She wasn't exploding throughout the whole movie, but she was shut off, like, oh, I never have cried, blah, 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 these things. But I wanted to ask y'all if y'all could describe your relationship with anger in a word or two or three, who knows, what would you choose and why? And I was thinking about this. I was like, what is mine? I have to be ready to answer it too. And I was gonna, I'll start off by saying I consider my anger like a really like good old friend. Where like back in the day we were really close. Let's say in high school. Yeah, like in high school, high school friendships where it's like we're just teen people, teenagers, and we got our little mood swings and things like that, and we're friends, we're not, we're going at each other's necks, all these things. That was my relationship back in the day. But now we've had time apart for a little bit, and now we can reflect on that relationship and see, using words from my therapist, that my anger was trying to protect me. And so it's like now I can hang out with him, but we're not super close. Like we have that past, but we definitely what has happened has happened. And now, we keep our distance with respect, if that makes sense. We're grown.
I think the word that popped into my mind for me was that's not my relationship, but more of how I think about my anger is like energy. Because it can be both like positive and negative. So sometimes like anger like, drives me to seek justice for things, and it pushes me to like push myself further. But then also a lot of times I've talked about this maybe on the podcast, I don't know, but definitely to y'all about how a lot of times whenever I get angry, I have like negative energy in my body to where it's like you're filled with bees and you're just kind of like vibrating. And I always have to find a positive outlet to remove that negative energy from my body, which is usually a combination of like physical exertion and then also like mental and emotional as well to like process through that. It's like one without the other. They're gonna healthily address that.
I think how I think about my anger, first thing that comes to mind is overwhelming. Most of the time, anger for me, it's in a negative connotation. So one way that I deal with anger is I have to be in a space by myself and conceal so I can get my time to just decompress. Otherwise, I will become so overwhelmed by my anger and that I'll just explode. So I think it's kind of impacts me physically in a way, like not that I feel like I have bees in my stomach, but I feel like sweat will come out of my pores. So that's how it impacts me physically. And so one way that I can just handle that is by going in a space to myself, decompressing, and then just being able to come back to address it. Especially like if it's something like I think it's important that I need to address it, and I'm just angry right now. I'm too overwhelmed to address it. I'll come back and I'll address it. But if it's like something I'm like, no, I'm not going to address that. That needs to be cut off. That's just what that is. I'll say my piece and I'll go.
I think mine. I didn't really think of it in the same way, but my anger
Share,
is
yes,
very
we
much
share.
I thought of it more in relationship to the movie. So my anger is very much like the water element. I am very good at crying when I get angry, and so that's how I kind of show my anger. But personally, I am like so, I guess, kind of taking it on this thing. I'm also so overwhelmed by the fact that I'm crying and I can't stop crying because I'm so angry that I have to figure out a way or like something to do. So I always like write things down when I'm angry, and then I like rework it until I know exactly what I'm going to say. So honestly, I write myself a little play and I practice until I know what I'm going to say, either to myself or to the person that made me angry. But all of it is just not a bad thing. I'm a really good crier though. But, okay, it's my turn for my question. So my question was, which theme resonated the most with you throughout the movie and why?
I'm gonna start because one of the things that resonated with me, even from the very start of the movie, is like the immigration process. Oh my gosh, that in itself made me bawl. Of in the beginning, even hearing them speak their native language, and then the person being like, "Let's just call you Bernie and Cinder," and things like that. That stuff made me so emotional. But like even with Ember being like, "It doesn't matter what I want. Like I don't have this type of family that you grew up with where you get to do whatever you want, blah blah blah." Because I can see it both ways. Because I have a really interesting like culture in comparison to my family. Because my family is from Mexico, and I was born here, so I'm closer to the Mexico side and like learning about the American side. But I can see where sometimes it's like we can do whatever we want, or here or whatever. Not to say they're super restricted over there, but culturally the norms are different and things like that. Like it's so random, but even thinking about my sister doing design, like graphic design and things like that, I'm like, wow, like that is something that has happened because we're here. Because I feel like in other countries it might have been like more domestic work almost, and things of that sort. Not to say that the arts are super appreciated here either, though. But I just feel like that's like something that I notice in our family is like she gets to have so much more freedom because she's more embedded into the to this culture. But seeing the difference between Ember and Wade and their thoughts and things like that made me really emotional. But also seeing how they like Fire City. I don't know where, I guess Fire City with or Fire Neighborhood, whatever it is. How that is. It kind of also reminds me of like there in our city. I feel like there was like a high like Mexican population in North Waco, and so it was like our own little thing. And it was different when we went to other places in Waco and things like that. So even having, I think it was called the fireplace, where fire folks come in and they're literally chilling there all day, eating like their cultural foods. I just felt like that was something that I got to grow up with too. Um, and yeah, so I feel like that whole theme really resonated with me. It made me super emotional.
Feel like one of the things that I noticed, because I've been trying to think about it, and I was like, I feel like there's so many things that my brain is like, no things, just good movie. But I feel like mine is very deeply intertwined, like with that of like intergenerational trauma and like how that manifests. And I don't know. I was gonna say, I don't know that that was necessarily the intended focus of the movie, but in a lot of ways, I think it was, because of how all of like the negative impacts on all of the generations that came before her impacted Ember's experience, and how she was not only carrying her own experience and her own experiences with the other elements, but she was carrying the experiences of her parents before her as well, which I think is always just so complicated and like and just so hard to process through that, because it's like, okay, not only am I like processing and validating like my own experiences, but I also have this feeling of needing to process and validate like my parents and their experiences, and sometimes my experiences might be different from theirs, so there's conflict in that. It's just a big old complicated thing. But I felt like that um, all of those experiences impacted everything that we saw and how just she engaged with the world around her.
Can I add one other thing? Also, when talking about Bernie's dad, he was scared that with them leaving Fireland, that they were going to lose who they were. I feel like that's very common in immigrant families, and I know like in Mexican culture, even though Spanish is not necessarily our native language, like losing Spanish is really a big thing. And there's a whole stigma in that with people who are Hispanic that don't speak Spanish. Like that's a whole thing of like, well, are you really Hispanic? And blah 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 blah. But even within the community, so there's that losing your culture part too.
I've been thinking about it while y'all been speaking, because there's just a lot of different things. I don't know, but just tied into acknowledging the intergenerational trauma that Ember has had to process throughout that entire movie. A big concept in the movie was like the journey of trying to find their peace and their happiness with what they truly wanted to do. I feel like a lot of the movie was focused on traditions of their own families, and with her mishaps of trying to control her anger and contain it, she started her journey of, you know, trying to find her way of being happy within herself, also being happy, not being happy, but making her parents happy, but just truly finding her peace with what she actually wanted to do instead of just like going along with what she thought she wanted to do. So it was a lot of different things in that movie.
Okay, so I can't remember what like the scientific term is, but like the dad was very concerned with like cultural assimilation, which is why when you look at his little band list, most of the people that are banned are not there. Like a lot of them were the water element because, and like when you stuck up Wade's picture on there when Wade was banned, it was like he was like talking about like water wants us to be like water. We are not water.
Water wants to water us down.
Yes. And so I thought that after that experience, I thought that it was really cool how Wade tried to learn a lot about fire culture, even if he like didn't always go about it in the correct way necessarily, but like I felt like he really tried to take the time to listen to Ember, especially when she would like blow up on him about certain things, because I feel like she was kind of like she would like be going this direction and then she was like talking like, oh my gosh, no, I can't do that. And so then she would immediately take like the 180. And so I felt like he was kind of blindsided a lot, but also I feel like the water, I don't know if this is how it's meant to be, but I felt like the water people were a lot of like representing white privilege kind of. And so like him being willing to take the time to learn about different cultures without expecting more than what Ember could give, I thought was a really cool thing to have.
Genuine curiosity.
Yeah.
I like how they showed that part though, because I think something a part of the immigration journey, even like mixed status families, our dreams look different. Because like their dream might have been to be at Elemental City. And Ember was like, well, this is the dream. Like we are living the dream. And when Wade's mom was like, you could do so much with that glass making talent. She was like, oh my gosh, why would you ever say that? Yeah. Or like even feeling like I'm not allowed to do that because that's too much. Like I thought that was real interesting too, and very much part of the experience.
Like I said, so many themes
Yeah.
and so much good stuff. It's genuinely, we cannot recommend watching this movie enough. It was
Thank you to Elsie for
Yeah.
putting me on.
So yeah, it was the first time I'd ever watched it. I think it was the first time you'd ever watched it. Was it your first time, Ariella, watching it, or had you already seen it?
Yes.
First time?
Yes.
Yeah. Wow.
So you wanted us to cry.
It's a good one.
You water person.
You want us to cry? But yeah, transitioning into our relationship goal for today, I have that for us for this week. So I just want to encourage everybody, take time this week to think about and research if you need to traditions that exist within your own culture or your own family. So research can look like going to the library or looking stuff up online, especially if maybe you're trying to learn more about your own culture. But research can also look like, particularly with family traditions, talking with your cousins, talking with your grandparents, great grandparents if they're still with us, your parents, your older siblings, your younger siblings, and also your friends as well. Learn from your friends. What are their traditions? So yeah, just taking a little bit of time to really connect with yourself, maybe in ways that you weren't previously aware of. And then our recommendation today is brought to us by Elsie, sponsored by Elsie.
Okay, I'm totally gonna go in a different direction than what I said earlier. And it's gonna be based off of your goal as well. So my recommendation is I went camping this past weekend, just for everybody to know. And also when I was a kid, my brother and I used to enjoy looking at the clouds and making shapes out of them. So my recommendation is to make shapes out of the clouds.
You just unlocked a memory for me. Me and my mom, when we would drive out to the country, we'd do that too.
Yep.
I used to also be like, Mom, the moon is following me.
Everybody feels like that at least once.
Yeah, I was like, what a universal feeling.
She's with us always. So yeah, lots of wonderful, I would say, in the cloud, looking at clouds, perfect tie into the movie as well. So it's all interconnected. But that is all that we have for you this week. We will be back next week with another special topics episode. But in the meantime, if you're wanting more Advocacy Center and prevention content, you can follow us on Instagram at ACCVC_prevention, or you can follow the Advocacy Center on Instagram and Facebook at Advocacy Waco. But in the meantime, we'll see you next week. Bye. Thanks so much for tuning in to Real-ationship Goals. This episode was produced by the Prevention and Education Department of the Advocacy Center for Crime Victims and Children in Waco, Texas. Interested in more content from P&E or the Advocacy Center? You can follow us on Instagram at ACCVC_prevention or on Instagram and Facebook at Advocacy Waco. Be sure to like this episode and follow us wherever you get your podcasts. See you next time. Bye.